Hello there. Welcome to another edition of the Inris Files, thoughts on culture, history, and the human condition from a very specific Generation X point of view. We are near the end of the month of March in the year 2026. That means we are very close to the very beginning of the month of April. And April 1st, at least in North America, and I don't know about the rest of the world, is sometimes referred to as April Fool's Day, when it is more common than other times of the year for people to play pranks on each other. And so this topic has sort of come up as something to talk about. I have children, and one of my children keeps feeding me conversation starters. It's brilliant. It's a great way for him to get to know things that I might not have otherwise mentioned because he asked a question. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. Tell me about a time in college when you whatever. I have no idea where he gets the ideas to ask for what he asks for. I don't know if they're occurring spontaneously or if he's brainstormed out a list or whatever the case may be. But every once in a while, he decides he wants to engage, and this is the way he does it. And it wasn't too long ago; it had been a couple of months ago, when he said to me, "What kind of practical jokes did you ever play when you were in college?" Something along those lines. And and it got me to thinking. And I told him about a few. And then time went on, and then oh, hey, that reminds me. And then I would tell him about a couple of others. And you know how once you start thinking of things, you start to see more that reminds you of those things. It's like when you buy a new car and you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you notice all of the other people who are driving cars of the same make and model that you are, or the same unusual color, whatever the case may happen to be. So we were running into this as well. I posed that question to my community just earlier today. What are some of your favorite practical jokes that you have played on other people or that have been played on you? And I got some great answers. And I believe I'm probably going to end up doing a follow up on the responses I got there. And I will also mention that if you're interested, you can participate in this as well. Go ahead and drop in the comments any of your favorite practical jokes, either that you played on somebody else or that were played on you, and we'll go through and we'll talk about some of them. If you're live on the live stream right now, and if you are so inclined, you can go ahead and type about it in the chat as well. But I started when I realized that this was probably a topic that I was going to talk about. I started to make a note in my notes app on my smartphone every time something would occur to me. Oh yeah, that reminds me about the time I did blank, or that reminds me about the time somebody did this to me. And I started making a list. And the funny thing is, just today, while I was on a call, somebody had said something that reminded me of one of these practical jokes. And then I started typing them into the phone, and a flood of ideas came to me. And so I'm going to tell you a few of my favorites, some of which fired great and some of which completely misfired. And I want you to think about it too, because the thing is, I think it is important for us to keep in mind what we consider to be um, within bounds when it comes to a practical joke. You don't want your practical joke to necessarily harm somebody else. At least I hope. In my case, I will not execute a practical joke with the intention of harming anybody. Um, and whenever possible, the joke should be funny on its own. It shouldn't necessarily have to require somebody else to feel put upon. Sometimes that may not be the case. Sometimes you'll play a practical joke with the intention of teaching a message or teaching a lesson, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's just good, harmless fun. So, uh, Not all of my practical jokes were ones that I played in college. There were some that were in high school, and there were several that have happened since then. I remember one time a former girlfriend of mine was talking about how when she was in high school, she spent the first half of April Fool's Day walking around with a cast on her left arm. And then halfway through the day, she went into the bathroom, she switched and put the cast on the other arm and then continued, and nobody noticed. I thought that was a very subtle practical joke, but the more I have thought about it over time, the more brilliant I think it is. What's even funnier is that the next day, I she only wore this fake cast those 2 days. She never wore it before or after, and nobody ever had any questions other than the first time they saw her wearing it. Oh, what happened? Oh, I just sprained because of this, that, and the other, and then no mention of it again. I will be mentioning some of my favorite jokes that other people have played. Um, but but certainly several of the ones that really stand out in my mind were ones that I either played or were played on me when I was in college. Some of them were innocuous. A friend noted, this was a friend, I think it was my freshman year in college, had noted that somebody had gathered together a list of all of the um, all of the classes that were being offered across all of the various departments at our university that had the word death in them, and had sort of suggested that oh, there's a new major at Cornell. So a friend of mine and I kind of reformatted this whole thing and then distributed it around campus. We put it up on all of the posters and bulletin boards when people were signing up for new classes, saying, "Attention, new major." For those of you who are in the arts and sciences school, you can now sign up for the new major, death. And then it just listed all of these classes that had that word in the title. Um, Obviously done very, very tongue in cheek. This is obviously a practical joke that doesn't have a direct intended victim. It's rather being done to sort of just amuse people. We had done another one, and this was one that we didn't even have inspiration from somebody else. Again, this was my partner in crime, who with whom I executed a lot of these practical jokes. We made up a poster to distribute around campuses saying wanted. I I really hope I'm not going to get banned by YouTube's algorithm for using these words. Wanted fresh cadavers for the biosciences department. And we used a graphic of I think it's Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. It's the image of the human male with his arms out and his arms up and his arms down, and he's just sort of standing straight still. And it's a map of the range of motion, and you see it. You're obviously thinking that there's something clinical going on. Wanted in the big bold letters, fresh cadavers, and posted it around campus. And we're sneaking around and we're going into all of the dorms and even back in the olden days, right? That we're talking now for forever ago, as some of the young kids will say, last century, posting these posters on the bulletin boards throughout all of the dormitories. We would have to get entry into the dormitories, and we did this late at night because we didn't want to be seen putting them up. So we would have to wait until somebody else was wandering in, which late at night there weren't as many people as during the regular part of the day. And we posted them in all of the buildings we could gain access to. The next day, when we were going to our classes or going to meet people in their various dorms, we noticed that all of those posters that we had made had disappeared. And we thought, oh, we must have been in violation of the campus postering policy because our campus actually did, well, it's a story. But anyway, we were worried that maybe they were being taken down because we were violating some policy, just like I'm worried about my videos being taken down if I use the wrong combination of words. And what ended up happening instead was we found out people were taking them off the bulletin boards and putting them up in their own rooms because they were so amused by them. So that was kind of cool. Later on, both of these made their way into the first issue of the humor magazine when another friend of mine and I took over the humor magazine for the campus. So that was kind of fun. We got dual purpose out of those. But uh, I think that one of the freshman year practical jokes that I played, it was done with the intention of teaching a lesson. And in the end, it not only I don't know, it accomplished the end goal, but it probably was a little bit meaner than it had to be. I had a computer. I was one of the few people on my floor who had a computer. I was in high school. I was all into computers. They were the coolest things, but they were also very uncommon. The personal computer hadn't yet quite made it into every household. My parents, my grandparents, aunts, and uncles, all sorts of members of my extended family pooled together their resources to buy me a Macintosh computer to take with me when I went to school. Not a lot of people had their own computer. This one was used, and it was just an amazing gift to receive as a going away present for going to college. It was one of these Macintoshes that was all in one case. And so you had the little, I don't know, 9-inch monitor or something like that that was grayscale. And then you had an additional keyboard that would plug into it, had a built-in floppy disk drive. There was no hard drive or anything like that in this early round of computers. And and then also a printer to go with it so that I could print up my homework assignments. I had a roommate my freshman year in college. My roommate did not have a computer, and he asked if he could borrow my computer from time to time to write his papers or do other homework assignments, and I was happy to let him do it. No problem. At some point, he managed to get a floppy disk that had on it a chess application, and so he would play chess on my computer from time to time, but then he would leave the computer on. Whenever he would use the computer, he would leave it on, and I would get home, and the computer would be left on, and it would just annoy me no end because this was to have your computer left on, you were worried about it overheating. I mean, these days, I very rarely turn my computer off. These days, I will go for a week at a time without even restarting the computer, which you're supposed to do on a regular basis for reasons. And yet, in these days, you don't want to run your computer for more than a few hours for fear of having it overheat. And in fact, somebody's posting in the chat here. I completely remember those portable Macs, like in the show *Halt and Catch Fire* on AMC. I haven't actually seen this show, but if you watch *Halt and Catch Fire*, apparently you can see what these portable Macs. I had, by the way, mine was it was called a Fat Mac because it had more memory than the very first Macs. It was the same form factor, but it had twice as much memory. I can't remember exactly. I think it had 512K of RAM. It's 512K kilobytes, not megabytes, not gigabytes, not terabytes, kilobytes. This, yeah. Bill Gates, who founded Microsoft, was once quoted as saying, nobody's ever going to need more than 16K for their computers. I think that's just shows a lot of prescience on his part. So my roommate kept leaving the computer on, and this was bugging me. And I asked him to turn it off. Could you please remember to turn it off? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I will. I will. I will. And then he wouldn't. And turning off the computer really wasn't a big deal. You just flip the switch. That's it. You were done. You didn't have to go through any elaborate shutdown process or anything along those lines, but he kept leaving it on. Well, this same partner in crime I had mentioned about when we would post things all around the campus, also, he was also very much into the Macintosh computers. And he had acquired one of these apps where if you were to double click on it, it would essentially be, it would play a joke on you. It would show an error message. Warning, something core dump, blah, blah, blah. And then you had the two buttons. You could click OK or you could click cancel. And in fact, I think it might have even started to draw like a chessboard or something behind it, but that wasn't the point of the app. Keep in mind, you would double click on the icon for the app. This starts running and then it tells you, oh, there's an error. And then you see the OK and the cancel. You're actually still in the program. You just don't know it. It looks like the program has errored out. So then you move your mouse to click on OK, and then the OK button would run away from your mouse, from the pointer for your mouse. And then, so it's running away. So now you move the mouse to go to where the button has moved, and then the button moves again, and you chase it all over the screen. And then if you were to click cancel, the cancel button would just go boop and disappear. You still had all of the apparent menu items at the very, very top of the screen that you would normally expect to see on your Mac homepage. And if you were to click on any of those, different shenanigans would ensue. But it just seemed like the computer was possessed. It was absolutely not behaving in any way that a computer should. At the time, you could quit out of any app at all just by hitting Command Q. That's all you had to do. Command Q, and whatever you're doing is done. However, that wasn't necessarily the first thing that would cross your mind if you saw the computer behave like this, because you wouldn't realize that you were actually inside an app. It looked like you were using the computer. So what I did was I put this, I took his floppy drive. I moved his chess app into another folder, something, I had named it something innocuous, like I'd given it a name that wasn't innocuous. I didn't literally name it that. And then I loaded up, I made a copy of this new app, and we changed the appearance of this new app to look like the other app, the chess app. And we changed the name of it to be the same name as the chess app that my roommate was playing. And I put it in the same location where his chess app typically resided. So now, next time he would use my computer, it would look like it would normally look like, and he would click on what he expected to be his chess app, and instead he would get this app that was just absolutely mocking him. I still remember the image of the button running away from your pointer as you were moving your mouse around. Very frustrating, very funny. Just did this, put the disc back where he would expect to find it, and then let it go. I had no idea the next time he was ever going to use it, but I figured, I don't know. I think what I was thinking was this would make him think more about how the computer behaved. I came home one evening after whatever shenanigans I was up to that particular evening, and I get to my room, and there's my roommate sitting at my desk looking at my computer, looking completely stunned, like he had no idea what had just happened, but something was really wrong. And he saw me and he looked at the computer and he looked at me, he looked at the computer, and he said, looking at the computer, "Oh, hi, Enris." And then he ejected his disk and he turned off the computer and he walked away. Um, Later on, I did switch back his chess app and put it back where he expected to find it, and I got rid of the incriminating evidence. Dragged it over into the recycle bin and made it disappear. The joke app. He never left the computer on afterwards. After that, he still borrowed it once or twice to write papers, but it was just one of those things we never really talked about. He never brought it up. I never brought it up. It had the desired effect. It was probably a little bit meaner than I needed to be, but it was a thing. There was another time more recently that I played a practical joke, and this was on one of my sons who, whenever he borrows, I bought a beater car for the kids to use after they had their driver's license and they needed to drive somewhere. I'm not made out of money. By the way, if you'd like to send me lots of money, I'd be more than happy to buy all of my kids their own cars, if I have that sort of cash. But I don't, at least not yet. So I bought this beater car, and one of my sons, every time he borrows the car, he leaves empty or half drunk water bottles, plastic water bottles in the car. And well, after if he has one and there's already one occupying the cup holder next to the driver's seat, he just throws it on the ground and then he puts the new one there. And so over time, the car accumulates all these half empty plastic water bottles. I'm not a big fan. I'm a big fan of my kid. Love him to pieces. He's absolutely the best. This, however, is not necessarily one of his most endearing activities. So what started to happen was every time I would get in the vehicle, I would gather up any of the plastic water bottles that were lying around in the car, and then I would empty them all out and I would put them into a big hefty trash bag that was in the garage way in the back where nobody would notice it. And then he would also leave these around in his bedroom. He would leave them, those were the two main locations. But over time, these accumulated. And then April 1st came along, and I had 2.5 huge, hefty garbage bags filled with nothing but empty water bottles. And I'm a night owl. The kids had to sleep, as kids do. And sometime after all the kids were asleep, I went out to the vehicle, and oh, by the way, this is a station wagon. So I filled up the back of the station wagon. I filled up the back seat, the footwells, especially. I didn't leave as many on the seats, but the footwells were all pretty much filled up with empty water bottles, and the passenger side as well. I didn't put any on the driver's side because I didn't want to. If he came out, I can't remember if he was work age or school age at this point. He was probably work age, but I didn't want to slow him down from getting to wherever it was that he goes in the mornings. But apparently, I am told, because I do not get up early in the mornings, that he was displeased when he observed all of these plastic bottles in the car. He expressed a degree of unhappiness. Um, and I guess he had people he was picking up after work or whatever later that day. And so he was going to have to clear all of these out of the car. Um, and he knew who did it. I mean, he knew, I mean, this wasn't like a computer app where you think maybe you're the one who made the mistake. Maybe it was because the computer had been left on for too long or something. No, he knew who had done it because I had been on him about leaving the plastic water bottles in the car. He cleared them all out and never said a word about it. Okay. I wish I could tell you that also means that the water bottle situation improved and it never happened again. I can't say that truthfully, but I brought it up once or twice, and he's very clearly irritated when I bring it up, just like I'm irritated when I find the water bottles. But these are the things that happen within families, and sometimes your practical joke doesn't land the way you would prefer. So this is the way things go. There is, however, oh, and by the way, I've got this long list. I'm going to go ahead and check them off as I tell them. I'm telling them way out of order. But let's see. I want to. Oh, I'll tell you another one that was about teaching a lesson. That also, it was clear who had played the practical joke, and it maybe didn't land as well as I would have liked, but it sort of alleviated the situation for a little while. And this was when I was working at the radio station. And I, at this point, was the morning news person, and the morning jock, that's what we call DJs. She lived across the street from the radio station. Typically, the jock was supposed to be in about an hour before their shift so that they could get everything set up before starting their shift and relieve the overnight person, because the overnight person is the least trained, least experienced person on the air at any given time at the radio station, unless you have an old hand who just volunteers to do the overnight. So at this particular time of year, it was the summer. During the summer, very few people are in town. A lot of businesses shut down or slow down because of the reduction. And it's a college town, and you had very few people in the area. So, your listenership is down too. News is generally slower at this time of year, or at least it used to be. This is before more recent times where things have gotten a little more exciting. And anyway, you're supposed to show up an hour before your shift if you're the morning jock. If you're the morning news person, you had to show up 2 to 3 hours before your shift because you had to write all of your copy for 4 distinct newscasts that you would be reading through, so that it always sounded like you were reading a fresh story every time, even if it was on the same subject. And even though usually there wasn't a lot of new information that would be coming in during the first 4 hours of the morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So, all right. I didn't always come in at 2.5 to 3 hours before my shift. I was usually able to get away with 1 hour, get enough written, get enough taken care of. And what we would do with the weather person is we would have them live during 1 or 2 broadcasts in the morning, but we would pre-record all of the others because, as a general rule, the weather forecast didn't change from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. when all they're talking about is the weather for the rest of the day and then the outlook for tomorrow, the next day, and the rest of the week. Very simple stuff. So you would pre-record it, and the way it would work would be this. I, as the newscaster, when I would start with 93, you're listening to 93.5 FM, WVBR FM, Ithaca, New York. I'm Inris Washington, and I would start reading the stories. And then afterwards, I would introduce the sportscaster by name. And now John with sports. And John does his sports thing, and then he cues me, and then I say, thank you, John. And now here's Kevin with the weather. And then we would hear the pre-recorded cartridge that I had recorded. I call him at like 5 a.m. and I say, okay, Kevin, we are ready to record your morning weather. And then he would give a short and a long version, and I would put them onto a cart. A cart is a Mobius loop, and it will play either 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 90 seconds in a row. And then at the end, it would automatically stop. And then if you were to hit play, it would play the same thing again. This is how all of the commercials were set up in these days. None of this was digital at this time. So I would introduce the weather person. We hear the recording of the weather person, and then he says, for WVBR News, I'm Kevin Williams at the Weather Center. Back to you, Inris. And then I would go ahead and continue reading whatever was next, and then I would throw to the DJ, to the jock. Well, I was crabby with the morning news person for reasons I don't even remember anymore. And all of the crabbiness between us has long since been resolved. And she's absolutely a wonderful person, an amazing person, and a very good DJ. She had also been with me in the news department before she switched over to the music department, just as I had later moved to the music department. But at this particular time, we were a little crabby with each other, and she wouldn't show up for her shift until 2 minutes after it started. So she was essentially requiring the overnight person to time out to the top of the hour and then play the news from NBC. We were an NBC affiliate. And then after the 3.5 minute mark, she breezes in at exactly 2 minutes after. She has a minute and a half to get ready to cue me and turn on my mic and start assembling the carts for the commercial break, pull the cart for the weather break, and get ready her song that she's going to play after the news is over. This is the normal routine. And I felt that she should come in earlier because she's giving the overnighter a heart attack every morning. And also, as I mentioned, we were a little chippy with each other at this particular time. So I decided, I don't know where I got this brilliant idea, that what I was going to do was, for the very first newscast, given that we had very few people listening, I figured that this was a joke that would be appreciated by our listeners. They would get that it was a joke and that it wouldn't necessarily ruin anybody's day if they did not hear that there was very little news to report on this particular occasion. So what I did was I read the script that introduced myself and the news, and then instead of reading any stories, I would essentially say, now here's Kevin with the weather. And keep in mind, the jock had come in just a minute and a half before cueing me. And the first thing I do is I essentially, after I read my intro, I cue the weather. She's not quite ready for this, but she realized what has happened, and she grabs the weather cart and she rams it in the machine and she presses play. And now she's scrambling because I think she realized that something was afoot. I had already spoken with the jock about this, and I asked the jock that after I introduce him, he says, "Thank you very much, Inris. Back to you." And likewise, with the weather forecast, when I was recording it that morning, I said, "Hey, Kevin, can we do a special weather forecast where all you do is say, 'Thank you, Inris. from the Weather Center from the WVBR Weather Center. I'm Kevin Williams, and cue to me. And he was totally on board with this. So I cue the weather. She slams in the cart. Kevin says thank you, and then cues it right back to me. And now you can see the dawn of horror in her eyes. And then I say, I say what I say, and then I cue the sports person, and the sports person says thank you right back at you, and then it's to me, and she's scrambling to get the first song she's going to play. She turns on her mic, and then she very quickly introduces herself, and then introduces the song, and as if she had been a part of the joke right from the beginning. As you might imagine, she also gave me the look of death after that song started playing, because she was a little upset, and rightfully so. Did this change her behavior? Yeah, she started showing up 5 minutes before her shift from that point on, and relieved the overnighter of having these heart attacks. However, that wasn't the end of the story. At the time, and this is still true, by the way, if you are a federally licensed broadcaster for radio or television, you go through a review period every year where you essentially fill out an application renewal form to say, yes, we're still broadcasting, we're still doing these things. And the public is given an opportunity to send in any questions or comments that can be reviewed as part of your renewal license process. 6 months later or so, it's time for us to go through that process of going through the renewal for our radio license. And so we're playing spots on the air, encouraging people to send in their comments and questions and concerns for the FCC file. As a general rule, nobody ever sent us anything. But on this particular occasion, again, this is 6 months after this had happened. So we're deep in the heart of winter at this point. And we get this letter that is addressed to the FCC file. And it essentially says, this station, you're all, you're so very amateur, and just, I tuned in to get the news this one day, and all that happened was the newscaster introducing the weather person who didn't give the weather, who introduced the sports person who didn't get the sports. And I don't know what was going on over there, but you're not very helpful, blah, blah, blah. Nobody who was there at the reading of this letter, because this was an event to get a letter from a listener about what we had been doing. And so a bunch of us are gathered around as this letter is being read. And I realized this letter is describing my shift when I had played this joke on our jock. And she wasn't at this particular reading, although I'm sure she became aware of it later. And you could see the look of confusion on the traffic manager's face as he's reading this letter to all of us. And everybody's like, what is this guy talking about? This is the most incoherent letter we have ever received in the history of letters. And I knew what he was talking about. And I said, yeah, I think I know what this is about. And I relayed a little bit of what had happened. And everybody was like, oh, you did that to her because of this? Yeah, that tracks. So nobody was shocked that I had done this, and nobody was shocked at the reasons. But that was just a little asterisk on that one. There were a couple of other radio station follies that happened. One time I had heard about another station that had done this, and so I did it briefly after we had for one newscast in the morning. I just read the time an hour later than it actually was. I'm still chuckling to this day because it's actually, I mean, in hindsight, it's really a terrible joke to play. When somebody asks you what time it is in the morning and you tell them it's an hour late than it actually is, people have heart attacks thinking, "Oh my God, I'm an hour late. How did I get to be an hour late?" Um, I did do that, and we also got a letter about that too. I yeah, I'm not necessarily proud of all of the pranks that I have played, but I don't know. That one was a little funny. But anyway, one of the best radio pranks that am aware of was at our radio station. I was not a direct participant, but I have experienced what happened to this on-air person, and I can vouch for the fact that this is absolutely true. The radio station had patches and cables and just every room had ports galore and patch cables galore so that you could reroute anything from any point in the station to anywhere else in the radio station, which was why whenever you were anywhere in the radio station, if there was a microphone in that room, you had to assume that somebody could be listening in at any given time, because with the right cables and knowing which ports to plug them into, you could reroute anything from anywhere, and you could turn a dead mic into a live mic without anybody knowing. You could also route what was going on over the air through to the commercial production studio, which was we called it Studio B, right? So we had Air 1 and we had Air 2, which were designed to be on air, but then Studio A and Studio B were designed for commercial production, except Studio A never got finished being built out, so we only had a Studio B. We could broadcast from Studio B if we had to, and there were times when we had to do repair work on both Air 1 and Air 2 at the same time, and Studio B could be used for on-air broadcast. Now, we had a bunch of reel-to-reel players in Studio B, and if you knew what you were doing, you could patch what was being said in Air 1. You could bring it into your reel-to-reel players and then take the output from the reel-to-reel players and then send it out over the air. And you could do it if you made the switch just right. Nobody would notice when you did it, the switch over. And what happened was the chief engineer, just as a joke and not for any malicious reasons or anything like that, he just thought it would be funny, and it is, to route what was going on in Air 1 through a reel-to-reel player before it was broadcast. And then he manually, because you could manually adjust the speed on the reel-to-reel player, he manually made it a little bit slower and a little bit slower, which added a little bit of a delay. Ever so slightly at first, but the delay was growing and growing to where the person was speaking, but what they were hearing in their headphones of what was going out over the air was lagging, first by a split second, and then by a whole second, and then by a second and a half. And as you increase that lag, when you're talking, you expect what you are saying to match what you are hearing. But what the DJ was hearing wasn't what they were saying. It was just behind them a little bit. So they did what anybody would do. And this happened to me later on, years later, when I was working at a football stadium that was open air. And so you would speak into the microphone, but then you wouldn't hear what was going on over the speakers until a second later, because it took that long for your words to come out through the loudspeakers and then reach from the loudspeakers to your ears. It's kind of like when you're at a baseball game and you're far away and the batter hits the ball and you see the batter hit the ball, but it's a split second before you actually hear it make contact. It's the same thing when you're speaking, and it takes that split second before you hear your voice. your inclination is to slow down so that what you're saying is matching what you're hearing. And it was very easy to keep slowing down further and further and further if you were not careful. And in this particular case, with this particular prank, it was played so slowly and so subtly that the DJ did not realize right at first that they were speaking slower and slower, trying to make things match up, until at some point they realized that something was afoot. They take off the headphones and then they finish their talk break. But yeah, I know that's kind of an esoteric joke. It's the sort of thing that nobody listening would understand what was going on, other than, why is the DJ speaking slower and slower? That's kind of odd. But yeah, fun shenanigans being had by all. I think that when you have people who have a light enough sense of humor, aren't taking themselves too seriously, the right kind of practical joke that is not intended as mean, but is intended to just kind of mix things up a little bit, can break up the monotony, break up the routine in such a way that enables you to laugh at yourself, laugh with others, and recognize that we are all of a community. We are all in this together. And that and again, even though some of the jokes that I mentioned earlier today were about trying to change people's behavior, nonetheless, a lot of times it can just be for the sake of having a little fun. And usually the people, if the joke is well crafted enough, the people upon whom the joke is being played will receive it accordingly, and everybody has a good time, and everybody has a story they can tell later on. Which brings us back to, what are some of your favorite practical jokes that either you have played or that have been played on you? I didn't even get to any of the jokes that have been played on me, and some of them are really, really funny. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, and maybe in the next live stream or two, we'll come on. We'll tell a few more of these stories and read some of yours as well. Please feel free to write them in the comments, and be kind when you comment to the other commenters. And thank you very much for joining us here at the Inrus Files. And I look forward to chatting with you again. Have a good one and take care.